What can you do to help osteoporosis naturally? Well, today we're going to find out. This is good stuff. You might want to take notes, but if you can't, just go down below. There's a link to healwithnature.com where we have a free checklist. If you like this, would you please hit the like button and also the subscribe button so you get notifications of all new content that we put out to help you live a longer, healthier life. Thanks.
Welcome tonight to the Garden of Light for our talk on osteoporosis. I was really a firm believer in organic, so aside from being a health food store, most of the products in here are organic as well. So if you get a chance afterwards to walk around the store, if you have never been here before, I encourage you. So I'm Dr. Mitch Kennedy. I'm a naturopathic physician here in town, Avon. I have a private practice here, and I also am the first and only naturopathic physician to be credentialed to practice medicine at John Dempsey Hospital. We're going to start with the basics, such as who's most at risk. Small bone people. Yes, and it's an interesting answer because it's not just women. Okay, men are equally susceptible as women because of. Hi, I think there's going to be another chair here, one right around the corner here. Because it has more to do with bone mass and density than it does gender. Certainly hormonal balance affects bone mass, and we're going to talk about that. Anything else? Any other demographic or geographic information?
Family history.
Family history, yep. Being Caucasian predisposes you to osteoporosis. And then our vices, right? Heavy smokers are at risk. Heavy drinkers are at risk. And I mean alcohol. And people who are on certain kinds of drugs like steroid medications, people who have certain diseases, certain kinds of cancers, people who have parathyroid disorders. Parathyroid regulates calcium metabolism in the body. It does other things, but primarily calcium metabolism. People who have hyperthyroidism, which is an overactive thyroid. And as we get older, people who are older are more likely to have osteoporosis than people who are younger. In fact, once we pass out of our 40s is our last decade of active bone building. And then after you pass through the 40s, you get into your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, you have to be much more conscientious about doing activities and doing things for your body that build bone. So what do you need to make your bones strong?
Vitamin D, calcium, and exercise.
Oh my gosh, the list just came right out. A very cooperative and participative group. So calcium, right? Vitamin D, magnesium, trace minerals. Anything I haven't mentioned? Vitamin K, hormones, vitamin C, zinc, manganese. And I said trace minerals already, but I'm going to reiterate it because there are a couple of very important ones like molybdenum and vanadium. And those are actually not so much involved in bone formation as they are involved in cartilage formation. And before you can have bone, you need a matrix, kind of like a mesh, to deposit the minerals on. And then that mesh sort of hardens, if you will, and becomes this tissue called bone. Did you know that bone is a tissue? What do I mean bone is a tissue? Well, if you take a look at your hand, for example, you have the skin layer, and then you have something underneath that called fascia, which is a network of fibers. You might have seen it on the chicken, like if you're taking a chicken breast apart, it's that white thin layer that kind of moves around on top of the muscle. That's fascia. Then you have the muscle layer and fat layer. And then you have another layer of fascia that kind of connects the bone to the muscle. And those are ligaments. And then ligaments and tendons. And then you have the bone tissue itself. And inside the bone tissue, you have this kind of spider web called a trabecula, which is that mesh I was talking about. And inside that, in the deeper, larger bones, you have a core that's sort of hollow and filled with red and white blood cells, called the marrow, right? Everybody sucked the marrow out of life, right? You heard that phrase. Or if you had osso buco, right? That's it's a beef shank that's got the bone in it, and you're supposed to suck all the bone marrow out. So the red blood cells are made in the long bones inside. So the center of the bone is actually hollow. And it's filled with this material that makes red blood cells. So bone is actually a very interesting tissue because it is penetrated by all sorts of arteries and capillaries and veins, and it has this ingrowing of the cartilage, and it has the red blood cell, white blood cell marrow in the middle. So it's very complex, and a lot of times people think, oh, bone is like, you know, solid, right? It's just like a rock, but it's not. It's actually meant to be kind of flexible. And that's why when you're a baby, you have a tendency not to break bones because your bones are still forming. They can kind of bend a little bit. And as we take in more minerals, the bones harden and grow. And then when we get old, they are in a state of non-growth, but unfortunately they're also in a state of turnover. And if you are turning over and losing minerals faster than you can replace them, that's when you start to have osteoporosis. Has anybody heard of the stage before osteoporosis? Osteopenia, right. Very smart crowd. I'll be on my toes all night now. How do you keep bones strong?
Weight-bearing exercise.
Weight-bearing exercise, yep. What else do we need? Everything that we just mentioned, right?
Nutrients.
Right? Okay, so we have things that wash minerals out of our body. Anybody think of one?
Caffeine.
Coffee, tea, caffeinated sodas, caffeine,
Excuse me, when you say tea, do you mean teas with caffeine?
caffeinated tea, yes.
Or caffeinated
Yeah.
beverages in general?
So decaffeinated is okay.
Sure. So, caffeine is a diuretic, and there are other things that are diuretics also. If you're on a diuretic to control blood pressure, you may be also at an increased risk of losing minerals, which is why many times people on diuretics will be given, say, a potassium pill so that you don't lose too much potassium, because that's the one that's most commonly lost. But you can also lose calcium and magnesium, which are, of course, the main bone-building minerals. Everybody remember what happened to the first astronauts that went up into space and then came back down? They lost bone mass. In fact, the Russians were the first ones to put cosmonauts up there for a long period of time, and when they came back and they actually stepped off of the planes, they broke their legs. And it was astonishing to the medical community, but then they realized that astronauts had to do exercises while they were in space to maintain bone mass. Because without the force of gravity to create that weight bearing, the bone didn't know whether it should be strengthening in this direction or strengthening in this direction, and so it became very brittle.
That can happen over such a short period of time.
It can. Yes, it can, especially if the person is also not taking in enough minerals. So, or is, as we'll talk in a minute, about being stressed. You know, certainly being up in space could I think, I've never been, it could be stressful. I mean, imagine if you're the first person up in space and there's never been anybody up there before, you don't know what to expect, right? So you might be thinking about that all the time. And it's going through your head, and maybe you're not sleeping well, and you can't exercise, and you're wearing this suit you can't take off, and I mean, it's not very comfortable. So as we think about how our body responds to stress, we find that our stress response cortisol hormone, right? Cortisol is what we secrete when we're under stress, is a diuretic. So people who are under a lot of stress, or what I like to say, people who don't know how to respond well to stress, are at an increased risk of osteoporosis because they're constantly creating all this cortisol, and if they're not taking in enough replacement minerals, they're losing more minerals than they're taking in. How do you take your minerals in, usually? Right? Through your food, right? Ideally, we'd like to get it from our food, right? With milk, we've always been told calcium, a lot of calcium in milk, drink your milk. Meat has a lot of calcium in it, because it's muscle tissue. Green leafy vegetables have a lot of calcium in them. So that's all real good stuff. Do we eat our meat, our milk, and our vegetables every day? Not so much anymore, right? Most of us are not cooking our own meals every day. Most of us are not home every day. If we go out to eat, we may not get what we need. So we have a growing populace that is deficient in minerals. Not to mention, the way we grow our food is also deficient in minerals. Are any of you gardeners? A couple gardeners? One gardener. In fertilizer, there's 3 minerals, right? NPK, right? Nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, right? You see any calcium in there? No. Any magnesium, manganese, molybdenum, vanadium? No. So over time, we're farming the same farmland over and over again, and we're not putting minerals back in that build our bones. We're not going to have the same content of minerals in our food. And we don't. There's been tons and tons of studies showing that organic farming is far superior to conventional farming in terms of mineral content, vitamin content, enzyme activity, and other types of phytochemicals like antioxidants. And so that's one of the main reasons why people should be eating organics, aside from the fact that pesticides aren't good for you either. And 60, 70, 80 years ago, most agriculture was organic by default because we hadn't invented synthetic fertilizers yet. So there was more of a connection and more of a cycle of nutrients going back into the soil. Okay, so how do we keep them strong? We're looking for weight-bearing exercise and the intake of good nutrients. How much weight-bearing exercise do we need? It'd be great if we could all do 30 minutes a day, every day. I mean, ideally, if we all did that, we probably wouldn't have an obesity problem, and we have a lot lower heart disease rate, and we'd probably have strong bones too. Weight-bearing exercise is anything that puts weight on your bones, okay? Specifically your spine, your hips, and your legs, okay? Because when people have osteoporosis, what do they most commonly break? They break a hip, right? Some people break a sacrum. Some people break a femur, a wrist. Basically, you break what you fall on, right? So if you fall on your butt, you might break your hip. If you fall on your hand, you might break your wrist. Walking may do it. Certainly, jogging creates more of an impact. I like to tell people to go up and down stairs, because when you're going down the stairs, you're getting a lot of impact. Jumping jacks, things like that. Climbing and hiking are very good for that also.
Not so great for the knees.
Not so great for the knees, no. Dancing might be good for you too.
How about biking? No.
No.
Unless you're standing up.
Swimming and biking and even rebounding on a trampoline doesn't give you the actual impact of the force coming down onto the bone and stopping against the earth and creating that direction. That's what the bone needs. It needs to know what areas to reinforce. And you want it to reinforce it along the lines of strength for holding you up. It doesn't do you any good if your bones are thick going out in this direction, because you're never going to really need any hard bones in this direction. You need hard bones along the length of your leg, into your knee, down into your ankle, because that's how the weight goes. And so that's why you need to have impact on that line of force.
So something like an elliptical machine doesn't really
Nope.
give you the impact, even though you're in a...
No, a lot of people with knee problems and hip problems will use an elliptical machine because it's very easy on the joints,
Yeah.
but they're not getting impact. Aerobics might do it, if you're doing like step aerobics and things.
So if you have osteoporosis and you have joint problems, what do you do then?
You need to treat the joint problems and hopefully get to a point where you don't have the pain and you can do the impact exercises. I've had some people wear backpacks filled with books and things and go up and down stairs. Excuse me. And that's sort of an easy thing, rather than saying, well, I'm going to take up running. So
How much would you have to do that, up and down the stairs?
up and down the stairs, well, it would be about the same amount of time. You'd probably want 20 to 30 minutes. You know, and initially, obviously, a lot of people wouldn't be able to do 20 minutes on stairs. But imagine how fit you'd be if you could wear a 20-pound backpack and go up and down the stairs for half an hour. Yeah, now let's back up a little bit. I said hips, right? So walking and dancing and things, that'll do your hips just fine. But what if you have osteoporosis up here, right? Or you have loss between your lumbar and the top of your head. When I say loss, I mean bone loss. Then you're going to want to wear something while you're doing this, so that more weight is being pulled down onto the spine, because that's the only way the bones get stronger. A lot of strength training at gyms is really designed around multiple muscle groups in the extremities, upper extremities in particular. You're not going to see that translate into the spine. Excuse me. That's not to say it shouldn't be done. So, all right, so then we have taking things in, right? Taking in the vitamins, taking in the food. If you take something in through your mouth, it has to go into your digestive system, right? And in order for it to get into your bloodstream, it has to be digested. Pretty obvious, right? Otherwise, it's going to pass right through, right? So we need certain things in order to properly digest our food and our supplements. That includes chewing properly, right? We should chew our food how many times? 30 times, yep. Before swallowing. We should have, geez Louise, right? Geez Louise, 30 times. That makes dinner last a long time, doesn't it?
Help keep the weight off, won't it?
Well, it's a really interesting phenomenon. If you chew your food better, it's in smaller pieces and you can digest it more easily, and you might feel full sooner, so you'd be eating less, and you may actually end up being able to tell when you're thirsty rather than hungry. A lot of people get this signal confused, and so they end up eating when they should be drinking. Right? So that's one of the reasons why I should chew 30 times. The second reason is the breaking it down so that it's more easily digested. Smaller pieces and smaller particles can be acted upon more quickly and more thoroughly by the digestive system. And you would need adequate stomach acid to be able to do that, because the stomach acid not only breaks down a lot of the proteins that hold minerals in place in the food and in the supplements, but it also activates digestive enzymes from the pancreas, so that the pancreas fully activates all the enzymes it needs to break apart food and supplements and create what are transport proteins that carry the minerals and other vitamins into your bloodstream. Okay, so that's two really important points: stomach acid and enzymes, and one activates the other. And you also need a good transit time. Everybody know what transit time means? Transit time is the time it takes from something entering your mouth to the time it exits. And it should be between 24 and 36 hours. If you're too quick, then you're not going to have the ability for your body to digest the food, activate the enzymes to act on the minerals, and the minerals to get transported into the bloodstream through the lumen of the small intestine. Because even though you have 6 to 8 feet of intestine, there's only about 18 inches that does most of the work. Right? That's the duodenum of the small intestine. It's right after the stomach. So it goes mouth, throat, stomach, duodenum, and then it goes into the rest of the small intestine and into the large intestine. And that's the gallbladder and the pancreas and the stomach juices all come together right there at the beginning of the duodenum, and that's where all the action happens. Really important place. So we need everything to be optimized so that we're going to take our minerals out of what we're taking and bring it into our body. Does anybody, since it's a smart crowd, I'll ask another question. Has anybody ever heard of celiac disease?
Yes.
Okay. Did you know that people with celiac disease are at a higher risk of osteoporosis, right? And we know that celiac disease people are sensitive to gluten, right? You can even say they're allergic to gluten because you can measure gluten antibodies in the bloodstream. So, if you have an allergic reaction happening in your gut, are you digesting well? No. No, in fact, that allergic reaction is interfering with your digestion to the extent that many times you can't absorb the minerals that you take in. So now, people who are specialists in the conventional world who do osteoporosis or women's medicine, when they see someone with osteopenia or osteoporosis, they are supposed to test for gluten sensitivity because the correlation is so tight.
How is that tested?
That test is done with a blood test. Yep. There are specific antibodies. It's usually a group of 3 antibodies, and the doctor just writes celiac panel, and then the lab knows what to run. And if you didn't know how to spell that, it's C-E-L-I-A-C. So that's a key component, right? We could have the best diet in the whole world, take the best supplements in the whole world, but if we're not absorbing them, you might as well just throw them right out the door, right? So digestive system health is really important. So the question is, what if it takes longer than 36 hours to digest? Well, then you're probably reabsorbing things that are trying to get out of your body, okay? So people who are constipated or chronically constipated are going to have more sluggish constitutions. They're going to be reabsorbing metabolized byproducts, essentially, of everything, and not being able to clear those and get them out.
How do you know how long it takes for your food to get through your body?
I knew it was going to come up. So Dina said, well, why don't you talk about the perfect bowel movement? I said, no, I want to save it for when I'm giving my talk. Okay, so this is the golden nugget, right? If you're taking notes, you want to write this down because this is worth everything else I'm going to say. The perfect bowel movement is 12 to 18 inches long. Okay, it's medium brown. It's well formed, meaning it's not fluffy, it's not formless, and it's not hard and in little bits or rocks. It sinks to the bottom of the bowl. It comes out without any pain, blood, or mucus, and it comes out at least once a day. Okay? So if you have all those characteristics, then that's a quick, easy way to know whether you're digesting well. If it floats, if it's fluffy, if it doesn't have form, or if it looks like little rabbit turds, you know you got problems. Let's talk about hormones real quick. A lot of the reason why women were placed on hormone replacement therapy originally was to maintain bone mass, because the large epidemiologic studies they had done showed that people go through menopause and men go through hormone decline as well, which is why men can be equally susceptible to osteoporosis. When that hormone level declines over time, we saw a loss of bone mass. So we know that estrogen can strengthen bones and keep bones dense. There's a precursor to estrogen called DHEA. And if you are of the mindset that human beings should live to be 100 years old or 110 or 120, you may be one of those people called a life extensionist and who believes the fountain of youth is in this hormone called DHEA. DHEA can be measured in the bloodstream, and it typically declines with age, pretty rapidly after the age of 30, and it's used in all parts of the body. Unlike estrogen, which is only used in certain parts of the body, DHEA is used everywhere, which is why people think it's, quote, the fountain of youth. Does it make your hair turn back to its original color, or can you grow hair? Or no, but it does prevent all sorts of degenerative diseases, including osteoporosis. So in terms of keeping bones strong, or to look to causes of why bones might be weak in the first place, a doctor should test DHEA levels, and it should be DHEA-S. It's the sulfated form. It's the form that's most prevalent in the blood. The hormone itself is it converts back and forth very quickly there between the DHEA and DHEAS, and is difficult to measure. So the stable form is the one with the S, and that's the one you want to measure.
That's a blood test.
That's a blood test, yep. Now, we sort of glossed over the underdog of the health system, which is vitamin D. Vitamin D, for a long time, was ignored. We said, yeah, you need it for bones, but we didn't understand that it works everywhere in the body just like DHEA does. And it actually can prevent 8 different types of cancer, can lower blood pressure, act as a potent antiviral. And so one of the leading theories of why people get sick more in the wintertime is actually related to fluctuations in the level of vitamin D. We know also that it plays a role in mood, which is why many people get the wintertime blues. And of course, it strengthens bones. It actively helps calcium adhere to and stay adhered to bone. Everybody should be tested on a regular basis. It's a blood test. Okay, it's a very simple blood test. And if you look at the range on the lab when you get it tested, you'll see it's quite large. It goes from 20 all the way up to 100. The interesting thing is if you get it tested and it's a conventional doctor who isn't too up to speed on the importance of vitamin D, he'll say, oh, well, you're 21, you're fine. When in fact you are a hair's breadth away from being deficient. You want a nice healthy gap between you and that borderline where you're deficient. And in fact, if you are really concerned about preventing cancer, you want to be at 70 or slightly above 70, because all the research that's been done on those 8 different types of cancer point towards that number of 70 being the key number where you get the most prevention. So when do you check your vitamin D? Well, the best time to check is just before it gets cold, dark, and gray, right? So somewhere around September. And I tell all my patients, some of whom are here and have already heard this, 2,000 units a day of vitamin D3 from September 1st to May 1st. If you go to a conventional doctor and you actually turn out to be deficient in vitamin D, he'll give you a prescription for 50,000 units of vitamin D once a week for 3 or 4 months. Okay? So 2,000 units is not very much. Very safe amount. Okay, stress management, right? We said cortisol is a diuretic. Cortisol can weaken bones. Anybody who's ever been on corticosteroids for any kind of disease will know that their doctors probably told them, oh, it could thin your bones, by the way. So steroids and cortisol from stress response is another big way that bones weaken over time. Okay. So can you live a stress-free life? No, probably not, right? Can you change the way you react to stressors in the environment so that you react differently? Definitely, definitely. Do colleges, universities, high schools, grammar schools, kindergartens teach you how to respond to stress in a healthy way?
No.
I haven't heard of any. Okay, it's something you need to learn on yourself. Where do you find the information? Bookstores, yoga centers, on your own, talking to friends. Any way you can blow off steam, any way you can relax is a stress management technique. It can be as simple as breathing properly. I want everybody to put both feet on their floor. Okay. And on 3, we're all going to take a big deep breath in. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so 95% of you aren't breathing properly. When you breathe up here at the top of your lungs, you're not getting much air, and you're not doing anything down here in the abdomen to relax the muscles. So when we're scared and we're running away from ferocious animals, like the boss who's yelling at us, for example, we're stressed and we're breathing up here. Okay, that's why people hyperventilate. They go to break that and do stress management, you have to breathe down here. So now, put both feet on the floor again. Put your hand on your belly. And what we're all going to do together is we're going to breathe out. And as we're breathing out, you're going to press your abdomen in towards your spine as we're breathing out. And I want you to get out as much air as you can, okay? So on 3, 1, 2, 3, and press. Keep going. More. Okay, now take a big deep breath and make your hand go out. Perfect. That was great. That was great. If you didn't get it right the first time, that's okay, but that's how you practice. And it's easiest to practice when you're lying on your back. So in the morning when you wake up, just before you go to bed, lay there, put your hand on your belly, practice breathing into your abdomen. Rock stars, opera singers, high-performance athletes, professional speakers, this is where they breathe. It's called diaphragmatic breathing. This is where you get lots of air into your lungs. This also stimulates and massages the abdominal organs, okay? So it helps with digestion. And this is where you should be breathing also when you're exercising. So that's a quick, easy stress management tool. If you can do that, you notice when you're feeling stressed, you put both feet on the floor, you take 5 or 10 deep breaths into your abdomen, and it's going to clear your head and reset you. Okay. And that will help break this secretion of cortisol, which will decrease the amount of calcium leaving your body and will keep your bones strong. Is it all connected? It's all connected. It's all connected. All right, what else we got? How do you test for whether or not you have a bone problem? Bone density test. It's an X-ray, and the best ones are of the neck of the femur and the lumbar spine, okay, which is the lower spine. You can have pinkies done, you can have ankles done, you can have wrists done, but this is where your big weight-bearing bone mass forming bones are. And if you're not good here, you're definitely not good out at the extremities. Okay, does that make sense? But if you measure here and you're marginal here, you may still be not too good here and you wouldn't know it. So the best thing is to get your hip and your lower back done. Absolute best thing. And the key is to always go back to the same place. And if you can't do that, you should have a copy of your results. So let's say, for example, in 2005, you went to a place over here in West Hartford Center, and then you moved to Boston, and 5 years later, it's time to get checked again. If they know the kind of machine and the type of test it was, they now have computer programs that will line up apples to apples. Okay? Because if you take your bone density on one machine and then you go and do it on a completely different machine, say it's a newer machine, for example, you're going to have two different readings and you're not necessarily going to be able to compare them in terms of, did I really lose any bone mass or didn't I? So that becomes a pretty important question, especially for people who are osteopenic, right? They're right on that borderline. Okay. How often should you be tested? You should be tested at least once every 5 years if you're normal. And then if you become osteopenic, you should go every 2 years. And if you're osteoporotic or severely osteoporotic, sometimes they check as much as every year. Okay. So the other tests you can do, of course, are vitamin D. There's also a quick test called a cross-linking telopeptide, which is a urine test. It measures how much change there is in collagen formation. And then what do you do to conventionally? Well, typically people are given biphosphonates, right? You know, and there are certain risks with those drugs, as there are with any drug. Jaw necrosis, basically erosion of the jaw, a lot of abdominal problems, a lot of things that come on in muscle tissue because they're interfering with the metabolism of calcium, basically. So that's.
So what's your opinion about them?
I think they should be reserved for people who have severe osteoporosis. I think they're too quickly prescribed these days, just like antibiotics were 10 or 15 years ago. And some of the long-term studies that are starting to come out on the first biphosphonates are showing that the fracture rates are not that different. You can strengthen your bones. Yep.
Go backwards.
You can go backwards. Yep. Yep.
Without taking medications?
Many times without taking medications. Yep. If your digestion is good, if you're taking adequate amounts of calcium, magnesium, vitamin D, you're tracking those levels so you know how much vitamin D you need. If you're taking the trace minerals that I mentioned, vitamin C, if you're getting weight-bearing exercise, you're eliminating your risk factors like smoking and drinking and being inactive and being stressed. All of that creates an environment where you'll have strong bones. Adequate calcium depends on how old you are and whether or not you have osteoporosis. Okay? So generally speaking, someone who is younger will need about 800 milligrams a day. Someone who is older might need anywhere from 1,200 to 1,500 milligrams a day, usually including the food you eat. Yep. And then if you're osteoporotic, you're going to need 2,000 milligrams.
But for an older person like me, can you absorb the milk?
As you get older, can you absorb the calcium in the milk? Very rarely. Most people become lactose intolerant as they get older, and so calcium from milk is not really an option. Calcium in orange juice is in an acidic base, and so you have it more freely available. I believe it is true of all dairy. Yep. The calcium that's in milk is bound to proteins. You have to break that bond in order to absorb it. Okay? Whereas if you're taking a nutritional supplement, you have calcium bound to different substances that are more easily absorbed by the body. So many times it's easier to take a supplement than to try to get it through milk. If you're going to buy the cheaper form of the mineral, you're going to probably want to take a higher range because you're not going to absorb it. Yeah. I mean, first of all and foremost, you got to make sure you're digesting well. Because it doesn't really matter what you're taking. You could be spending $100 a pill, and if it's just going right through you, who cares?
And so are there good things to take it with or without? So are there?
Yeah, minerals in general should be taken with food because your digestive system's all pumped up and trying to digest the food. So minerals and vitamins go with food. If you're taking herbs, for example, a little off the topic, but herbs work better away from food. Yep, same thing. Multivitamins are the same thing. You've got good ones and bad ones. If you buy your vitamins here or through a doctor who has a medicinary, so they're kind of like prescription only, you can be assured they're the highest quality you can get. If you go to some other store where they're competing on price, you're asking for trouble. People in the United States like to think they can take one pill. That if you take one pill a day, you're going to be perfect. That's the silver bullet syndrome, right? We're looking for the silver bullet to solve all our problems. There's no such thing.
Did you cover the magnesium?
Ah, smart person. No. So you can take all the calcium you want, but what you really need is you need to balance that with magnesium. People need half as much magnesium as calcium. However, some people actually need the same amount of magnesium and calcium.
So how do you know?
How do you know whether you need? No, actually it's very difficult to test calcium and magnesium levels. Most of the tests that do that are not very accurate, and so I wouldn't recommend it. You go by your own physical symptoms. If you're taking a calcium and magnesium supplement and you're still getting cramps, muscle
Like
cramps,
in your legs.
so yeah, like in your legs and your feet, then you probably need more of the magnesium because magnesium relaxes muscles. Now don't forget, you want the vitamin D in there, but I'll tell you that no one's going to make a vitamin D supplement in their calcium supplement that's going to be 2,000 units a day. Nobody does.
No.
Nope. There you get like 400 or 200 units, so you're going to have to supplement.
And it should be the D3.
D3 all the way, yep. You have the same issue with magnesium that you have with calcium. You have 3 different formats. You can have magnesium oxide, which is great if you're constipated and you want to go to the bathroom. Think milk of magnesia. Then you've got magnesium citrate, which is sort of middle of the road in terms of absorbability. And then you've got chelated magnesiums like glycinate and there's all different kinds, a whole family of them. So those are your high absorbability, the ones that are probably going to be the best for you, but they're going to be closer to the top end of spendy. Oh, I didn't even talk about vitamin K. Yeah. Vitamin K comes from green leafy vegetables. Vitamin K is manufactured in your intestines also by bacteria. Boy, people must have like half a book. I see all furious writing going on here. Vitamin K is one of the intrinsic factors in helping to stabilize bone. So you need vitamin K. You should use vitamin K under the supervision of a doctor, and you should check your clotting time, because everybody needs a little bit different amount. Very, very small amounts are safe, but then I'd also say probably not very effective and more of a gimmick than anything else. So if you see some kind of calcium supplement that says, oh, it contains vitamin K, it's probably not enough that is going to be significant. Blood test is called a PTT or an INR. That's a clotting time test. People who are on Coumadin have it done all the time. It's a very commonly done test, not expensive. How much food do you need to get your digestion going? You want to do yourself a service. You don't want to try to skimp on the food just to get your vitamins in. A lot of times if you're taking a multivitamin and you're taking it without food, it'll cause some nausea. So it's really important to have enough food, and even if you have to take it in the middle of the day because you're a person who doesn't eat breakfast. Trace minerals would be the things like molybdenum and vanadium. A very good calcium supplement will have those in them, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. Yeah.
Whew, that was a lot of information, but don't worry, we've got you covered. There's a checklist down below if you click the link that says healwithnature.com. Also, would you please hit the like button, which is the thumbs up, and also the subscribe button so you get notifications of all the new content we put out to help you live a longer, healthier life. Cheers.